Hello everyone! This video, I'm going to talk about sex and gender. And although you might have been told by a bunch of conservative YouTubers that there's no difference between the two, that's very interesting because I don't remember having gender with their mum. In all seriousness, this video is going to be for people who have heard about the fact that people say that there's a difference between sex and gender, but don't really know what that means and don't really know what it's all about. So I'm going to tell you, once and for all, what it all means. Let's start off. First of all, we talk about sex. Sex is the biological nature that's typically defined by chromosomes. I say typically because it's not always the case. Sex involves the primary and secondary sex characteristics. Things like genitalia, certain body hair growth, changes in skeletal structure between male and female bodies, these kind of things, the physical things. These are typically defined by chromosomes, but not always. You see, whereas normally a male has XY chromosomes and a female has XX chromosomes, sometimes this can differ. We call this intersex. Intersex is an umbrella term for a lot of different things that just pretty much mean anything wherein there's a difference between what we would expect physically and what is occurred. This could be anything from different genitalia to the other sex characteristics. So you can have male anatomy on the inside, but female anatomy on the outside. Or things like having XY chromosomes, but otherwise being physically female. These things happen, and they happen quite often. In fact, depending on what you call intersex, it's estimated that there's between 0.02% and 1.7% of the population is intersex. If you take the average of those numbers, you apply that figure to the world's population, you get about 67 million people who are intersex. That's about the population of France. So this is not something that happens like once every millennia. These things regularly occur. And for most people, they don't even know they're intersex, because intersex could mean as much as being completely fertile, being completely physically female, but having XY chromosomes. And because most people never have a reason to test their chromosomes, a lot of people who are intersex probably never even know they are. And why is this important? Why is it important to recognize that not everyone has the biological sex that you would expect? It's important to recognize this because it's important to start seeing sex and gender, and we'll get to that in a minute, as something else but just a binary. It's not just male or female. There's a lot of it in between, and a lot of it that's neither, or that's different. And it's not just bad. It's not, you can't just brush it off as a mutation and just forget about those people. There's a lot of them, and they need representation. So what's gender? Isn't it just the same? Not exactly. Typically, whereas sex is defined as like physical attributes, gender is defined as everything that is not physical. This is behavioral, social, cultural, societal, those kind of things. And this is not me saying this from a very leftist point of view where I found this information in this book right here. This is science. The American Psychological Association defines gender to be just that. It's typically female or masculine, typically male or female, but not always. It can be neither, it can be both, or it can be something altogether different. Things that we consider to be gender are things like fashion. I wear a lot of suits, and because I like the traditionally masculine style. But why is a suit masculine? Why do we consider a suit to belong to men? There's not really an answer to that. It's just culturally shaped that way. If you go back 1,000 years, you see an entirely different fashion. In fact, you don't even need to go that far back. If you wear a wristwatch, for instance, at least if you're a man, and you think that's a masculine thing, I invite you to look up the history of the wristwatch. Wristwatches really weren't considered masculine at all. In fact, before the war, and the First World War that is, they were considered to be so feminine that no man would ever want to wear that. That's woman's jewelry. You're not going to wear a wristwatch. Until the war. In that war, soldiers realized that if you wanted to coordinate attacks, it'd be useful to be able to hold your rifle while also checking the time, and that was impractical with a wristwatch. That's why the first male wristwatches were just pocket watches strapped to men's wrists with leather straps. And later, that trend set forth and actually integrated into masculine fashion that we know today. These kind of things happen all the time. It's a little while ago, you might have noticed that Harry Styles was trending because it was in the cover of Vogue in a dress. And someone was really angry with that. That someone has a lot of photos where she wears suits. In fact, in society, it's much more accepted for women to wear traditionally men's clothing than the other way around. It's one of those things that kind of frustrates me because I really like fashion and I like to have choices. And although I like traditionally masculine clothing and I'm lucky in that sense, what if I want to wear a dress? Who are you to tell me I can't? Fuck off. But that is what gender identity is. It's what you define to be. It's what you feel you are. And people can identify as different things for various different reasons. People sometimes identify because that's just what they're happy with. That's just what feels better to them. People can identify with certain pronouns as a form of protest even. It's a very difficult subject to talk about because people kind of do what they want. And I think that's really cool. I think that if you want to identify as whatever you want, that's cool. People can identify with different pronouns for all types of reasons. And certain conservative types seem to think that the acceptance of these different pronouns is the end of the world. Very popular Canadian online conservative man, Jordan B. Peterson, actually pretty much built his career on the idea that it's somehow Orwellian that Bill 16 would be instated, which would make it illegal to use someone's non-preferred pronouns. Till this date, no one has ever been arrested for doing so. Shocker, I know. But these kind of things happen often. A lot of the time, people are very, very outraged at laws that would make it illegal to use someone's pronouns that they don't want to identify with. A little while ago, this was in New York, such a law. Problem was that law that, yes, made it illegal to use someone's non-preferred pronouns up to a fine of $250,000 was just for people with businesses who would maliciously, knowingly, and continuously berate someone by using different pronouns. I think it's very important that we need to protect vulnerable people in society and make sure that certain marginalized groups can't be marginalized. And a way of doing that is to make sure that gender is a protective class. This doesn't mean that if you say, "Excuse me, sir," while someone actually identifies as woman, you're going to go to prison for the rest of your life. It means that if you maliciously, purposefully, and knowingly misgender people because some problem you have with like gender identity, that can be prevented and that can be something that we leave behind us in the future. It's very important that we do this. And I think it's important to have different opinions. If you have a different opinion on this, that's fine. I'm not saying you can't have an opinion, but there's a time and a place for everything. You can have a difference in opinion on how we should approach this, sure. However, not really to someone's face. You can't really go up to someone's face and then be a bigot to them and then say, "Well, I'm just a free thinker, man. I just don't want to bend the knee to the Marxist, globalist, whatever society that forces me to use these pronouns, man." because it doesn't make you a free thinker. It just makes you a dick. Sex and gender are something that's not that easy. It's not as easy as a binary. And I think this actually hits the crux of many of the problems. And I know a lot of people might not like me saying this, but I genuinely believe this. Conservatism is an easy belief. It's true. It's easy to believe that sex and gender is just a binary and it's one of the same. It makes the world easy, simple, uncomplicated. If someone has short hair and is wearing pants, they're a man. And if someone has long hair and is wearing a dress, then they're a woman, and they have the appropriate genitalia to match. However, the reality of our society is that nothing pretty much is a binary. Things are different, and things change, and culture changes with it, and our understanding of who we are and how we function as human beings changes all the time. And it's important to change with it. It's important to realize that if someone comes to you and says that they want to be called Steve, whereas previously you called them Julia, that you accept that. And that it just makes you a dick if you don't do it. And if you keep being stubborn and keep calling them Julia, despite the fact that you know they don't want to be called that. And we can talk about it. We can have discussions. I believe that you can have discussions as long as you don't harm anyone. And purposefully misgendering people to their face is harming them. And I don't think we should inflict harm on one another. It's just one of my personal beliefs. And there are many more things that are very complicated and that you could explain very easily but less accurately. Things in reality and in nature aren't a binary. They rarely are. And even if they are, we should be open to the idea that maybe if new evidence arises, they're not binaries. Barely anything ever is black and white. There's a lot of grey area in the world, and we need to accept that to move forward. I know this is a shorter video than I normally make, but I wanted to keep this concise. In short, in case you forgot, sex is biological. It's the sex characteristics that you have, your genitalia, your facial hair growth. But there are differences in this. If there's a variation, we typically call this intersex. And anything that isn't physical, anything that's behavioral, anything that's cultural and societal, that's gender. And what matters most is what someone identifies with as their gender identity. And it's important and respectful to call someone by the gender identity they want to be associated with, that they want to identify with. And if you don't do that, yeah, you're just kind of a dick. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I could have informed you a little bit. If you want to see more of these kind of videos, then you know which button to press. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a good day.